Now to the phase here where we're talking about something very hopeful that I have seen as a solution since this was put on my radar screen. I want to get to the individual here who first informed me about this. This is Rick DeSantis. Any of you who were with us last September got to hear from Rick. He's a survivor of the South Tower attack. And after 13 years of silence, somebody in Florida where he was living gave him a copy of Loose Change. And he was then motivated to start speaking out about what he knew. He had taken many, many photos the day of 9/11 and a few days after 9/11. And there's some unique angles from the south, looking up north towards the towers of his photos. And now Rick was contacted by Representative Walter Jones of Florida. Walter Jones was the guy who, in the drum beating, the saber rattling leading up to the Iraq War, coined the phrase "freedom fries," when there was everybody in Congress was bashing the French for not going along and following in lockstep with the Bush agenda to invade Iraq. Everybody remember freedom fries? And it was all over the media. There was a big laugh, right? So there had been in 2002 a report, the initial report on 9/11 by the Senate Joint Inquiry, an 860-something page report. And in that, there was a whole chapter eliminated, 28 pages. Senator Robert Graham from Florida, former senator, who was the co-chair of the committee, of the Senate Intelligence Committee, was very troubled by this, as well as Richard Shelby, Senator Richard Shelby, and many others, and had been speaking out about the need to release these 28 pages. They were very troubled by it and wrote to President Bush. I'll get a little bit more into that. But now, since it was classified, these 28 pages, the politicians were very limited in what they could say about it because they would be breaking certain laws and get accused of espionage and who knows what else. Now, which is another consequence of 9/11, the threat that if you're going to say anything provocative about 9/11, you get charged with espionage. Okay, now Robert Graham then, in order to get a further, wider understanding of what was in those 28 pages, he fictionalized it in a book, a novel called Keys to the Kingdom. Then Walter Jones read the book, and it triggered his curiosity, and he started to wonder much more about 9/11, and then he made a request to the House Intelligence Committee to have access to those 28 pages to read them, which anybody in Congress can do. They have clearance if they submit a request to the Intelligence Committee. And there's a whole board. There's, I think, about 8 Republicans and 8 Democrats. And there's a committee chair. It used to be I think Mike Rogers, who recently, well, in the whole series of Edward Snowden revelations, you saw him all over TV saying Snowden's a criminal and has committed crimes of espionage and so forth. He was the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Jones had to submit more than one request. Finally, he did get access. He read the 28 pages, and he was shocked. And folks, every congressperson who has read these pages has experienced an awakening. Okay? Walter Jones contacted this gentleman here, Rick DeSantis, and saying that he would like to get Rick's help to release these 28 pages. And then he submitted what was at that time House Resolution 428. It's just a one-page resolution calling for the release, calling for Obama now to release the 28 pages. Now, in the new Congress, this past January, it had to be resubmitted. It was introduced right away. Well, they didn't wait. It was January 7th, actually January 6th, and on the 7th was this press conference, and it is now HRES 14. It's a bipartisan resolution. On the right is Walter Jones. Okay, on the left is Stephen Lynch, who's a Democrat. And this is what the underlying purpose of this resolution is. Okay. Number one, government must be more transparent. Transparency is a very, very big buzzword, right? Because these politicians have to take a stand for transparency if we're to have a functional democracy, right? It's just a key ingredient. So they are running with this as an integral concept of why the public must demand the release of these 28 pages and why Congress must take action on it. Two, the 9/11 families who have suffered all these years deserve to know. Okay. Now, of course, well, how many folks are aware of the big 9/11 families lawsuit against the Saudi government? Okay, a few of us are, a few are not. There's a big, I guess you could call it a class action lawsuit. I think there are 6,000 9/11 family members on a lawsuit against Saudi Arabia for evidence, based on evidence that there's more of in these 28 pages about funding coming from certain Saudi royal family members. So in that case, went through the courts. It was defeated by the Saudi government. They appealed. The 9/11 family members appealed, and then they won the appeal. So it has been reinstated, and it is currently live and active and in action. So they need this these 28 pages to be declassified. Then the third reason. Now, Bush, W. Bush, right? He classified this chapter, his administration, in 2002. And the reason why any information gets classified, the only reason it should be that it's a threat to national security. That it would be, quote, revealing state secrets or information that would be detrimental to the security of the United States. It could be classified. Well, right from the very beginning, Bob Graham and others have been stating there's nothing in there that has anything to do with national security. It's more having to do with relationships, and they were all really dismayed. I mean, you could, if you look at the news clips on YouTube, you see like like Richard Shelby and looking very sad. Like, no, this has more to do with relationships, and yet protecting relationships, and there's. So anyway, I first want everybody to just understand these 3 points. This is the rationale behind the current effort here to release the 28 pages. Okay, here's what some of the members who have read the 28 pages are saying. The 28 pages show the extensive advanced planning before 9/11. And he alludes to collaboration with other governments, not just Saudi Arabia, and government agencies. Now this is, the government agencies phrase is a very, very intriguing part. What they're referring to, mainly, I think, is the FBI cover-up and collusion, which I'll get more into here shortly. Walter Jones' statement. If the 9/11 hijackers had outside help, particularly from one or more foreign governments, the The press and the public have a right to know what our government has or has not done to bring justice to the perpetrators. Thomas Massey from Kentucky. I went to the soundproof secret room here in Congress and read those 28 pages. And it was really disturbing event for me to read those. I had to stop every 2 or 3 pages and rearrange my perception of history. It challenges you to rethink everything. Now, this is very, very powerful stuff. I mean, these are politicians who, let's just assume they knew very little. Or that, like the general public, let's assume that they were just, consumed in the horror of the event, the emotional reaction to the deaths of 3,000 people and the attacks. Let's assume that they were coming from that angle that we, quote, we were attacked, just like the Hermann Göring quote that Mark read. Well, after reading these pages, folks, there's an awakening that happens. And so the effort behind the release of these 28 pages is to get our Congress people to do what these did. Because there's so far just a handful. We need as many people as possible in Congress to read the 28 pages. And so there has been an effort going on since October of this past, of 2014, to work on a campaign to mobilize people around the country to just contact their congressman. Ask them to do 3 things. Read the 28 pages. Would you please read the 28 pages? And get back to me to let me know if you do. You got to follow up, check with them, and get the response. And then, secondly, to co-sponsor the bill. I'm sorry, the co-sponsor the resolution. And then thirdly, in order for it to get voted on, the leader of the House, which is, John Boehner, has to allow it to come to the floor. So that's going to take a lobbying effort. It's going to take a lot of numbers. Okay, so this is where it is now incumbent upon us as citizens to get legislatively active, and it takes minutes. We have a website, by the way. Let me see if I can get to here. At one point, show it. We have a website, hr14.org. There's background on this, as well as a take action section. Within minutes, folks, 2 minutes, you can click a couple of buttons and put in your zip code, and it sends a letter to your congressman. Following it up with a phone call, organizing with us to set up visits to their offices. And this is where it's, if we want them to take action, we got to make noise, okay? And right here in Manhattan, by the way, Jerry Nadler, Congressman Jerry Nadler, whose district is Southern Manhattan, has been an obstruction. He does not want to participate in any way or form. This lady right, Kat, would you like to tell your experience?
Yes, I went to the office and I talked with one of his representatives.
Well, louder.
I went to Nadler's office and I set up a meeting with one of his people and just tried to say, why isn't he investigating this? Why doesn't he ask to read? And she keeps getting back to me with, I finally met her, but it was just a brush off, really, left and right. So.
That's a question.
Can I ask a question? Is this okay, Tom? Just a quick question.
Okay.
I'm just worried, is there a danger that this could be a kind of a trap, in the same way that the Epstein right-wing critique, that leads to Cuba somehow, that was always the reason given why the Kennedy, the cover-up that Warren Commission was actually covering up is because it was concealing Soviet involvement in Kennedy's death and that would lead to World War III, blah, blah, blah. So this sort of just instinctually feels to me, given its provenance, given the kinds of things they're saying, that this could be kind of emerging from a place of we're protecting the role of certain allies, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, etc., and the outcry for war with these places would be such. You know, it's sort of like a John Bear, Anonymous, Sleeping with the Devil. You know what I mean? A sort of form of limited hangout that could actually bring us into a really ugly place where you have the American people calling for more war with more countries.
That is certainly what many people are, not many, but certain people are asking those type of questions. My take is this, and I was there at the January 7th press conference when Bob Graham spoke and the others spoke. Also, I happen to know from Rick DeSantis a few things about his conversation with Walter Jones. I also happen to know, hopefully you all know as well, of the experience of certain previous politicians who really tried to ask hard questions about 9/11. Cynthia McKinney, Max Cleland, Kurt Weldon, Mark Dayton, and of course Tom Daschle and Patrick Leahy, who challenged the Patriot Act, and of course Patrick Leahy, yeah. So,
But do you have a clear sense of what the language might be? I mean, like how
in the 28 pages?
Yeah. Does it really implicate like U.S. government agencies in the planning of 9/11, or just the cover-up involvement of other countries?
It implicates, well, I mean, as far as the planning, here's what, one thing that Bob Graham has articulated is that based on this information, it is clear that there's no way these 19 Arabs could have acted on their own. So
Okay,
that,
I have a question about this.
You know.
Can I ask a question? You know, having been at the September event here, and we heard from people who were there that day, and there's a chilling story by the woman.
Speak up.
I'm sorry. There's a chilling story by a woman who was there that day and was in a building next to the towers, and who saw one of the planes flying directly at her, and then it banked around the building she was in and flew into the first tower. I'll never forget this. She said that there was nobody in the cockpit. Okay? Nobody in the cockpit of the plane. There was nobody. She saw nobody in the cockpit. Yeah, and this tallies with much that David Ray Griffin has written. There are serious questions as to whether there were 19 Saudi hijackers, because there's very little evidence that they existed. So I'm wondering
that they were on the planes.
Well, this drive to declassify the 28 pages, which I wholly support, seems to be predicated on the assumption that the Saudis were involved with the 19 hijackers, and I've already learned from the movement that there's serious questions as to whether there were 19 Saudi hijackers. So how do we, what do you say to that?
Sure. It's a distinction. Here's the way to look at it. That 19 Arabs were definitely associated within 24 hours of the attacks. We all know that. The identities. Now, this is what I think is actually very, very positive about this whole development, because as this goes forward, this H.R. 14, this inquiry about the 28 pages, other questions come into play, such as, well, wait a minute, what about the fact that at least 7 of them were reported to be alive by the foreign press? You know, other questions like this. And then, what about the fact that Hani Hanjour flunked his Cessna flight lessons? You know, all these other questions, which starts to then unravel the whole thing. This is, folks, a way to start the thread. Start the thread doing this. Get wider and wider and wider. So
you look at this as a wedge, the nose under the tent.
this is whatever what you want to say. The nose under tent. I think it's a it's a very, very high potential catalyst to begin the unraveling and then of a much wider array of information.
It might be.
You know, and well, but here's the other thing I feel, and everybody just has to come to their own determination, is if the politicians taking these actions were, do you feel like they're in a position to to bring forth the wider analysis of 9/11, whether it's the physical evidence, in those types of areas, that really get into the really controversial stuff, which, folks, that this is 1,000 times more radioactive than Watergate. Okay, and these politicians are fully aware of this, and they're I don't know, you put yourself in their position. You know, it's all about. Okay, I think they're acting tactically because they're knowing that, okay, the 9/11 family members are after certain information. They're knowing that the issue of transparency is absolutely very, very instrumental and salient to the whole conversation of having a legitimate functional democracy, right? And so forth. So they are acting tactically because they know. I mean, in the press conference on January 7th, a direct question was asked. I was sitting next to the guy about, is there anything in the 20 pages about Building 7? Now, imagine how that got in the room. And by the way, in the room there was New York Times, Fox News, Cox News Network, McClatchy, you know, and a few others. They were in the room. And you know what the three up there, Bob Graham, Walter Jones, and Stephen Lynch, all they did, and I think this is very telling, they just, without a flinch, they just said, Graham said no. Very, totally matter-of-factly, no. Meaning, they know all about that information. So,
I don't see how that follows, Les, but I don't see how that follows.
well, if they didn't flinch like what are you talking about, or how dare you, like that's too controversial. No,
They just dismissed it, I saw it, they just dismissed it, I'm not sure what it means. Can I
It's not,
suggest
they
one
can talk
thing
about what's not in there. They can say if it's not in there. They just can't talk about what's in there.
Yeah, and then you can do what I did. Call the staff, call their office, and talk to them. And guess what? The staff knows. And the staff also will tell you that no, we are not going to do anything where we can be labeled conspiracy theorists because of the power of the media to basically, you know, completely marginalize them. So, go ahead, Phil.
His point is correct. I mean, the whole thing could get turned around. The situation is so poisonous in this country that any attempt to reveal truth can be completely turned around. It's a definite risk, but it's a risk we have to take. We need to take every single opportunity we can to expose this stuff. Now, one shortcut I just want to mention, you haven't mentioned it. Graham was very explicit. He said, financing by the Saudi Arabian government, he said this is not private, this is Saudi Arabian government, funding by the Saudi Arabian government of perpetrators of 9/11, and then he said specifically, through the embassy, the Saudi Arabian embassy. Now, everybody in this room should know that the Saudi Arabian ambassador to the United States at the time of September 11 was Bandar Bush. Does everybody know who Bandar Bush is?
Yeah.
I mean, Bandar has been associated with the Bush family for decades.
Right.
He's directly implicated in Iran-Contra. I mean, he's been around for a while. In fact, he's directly implicated in the false flag attack in Syria. All right? But I mean, as soon as you realize that Bandar is synonymous with this funding, you are looking at the Bush family.
Right.
That's an important shortcut.
Right, right. And I think that's a very important time, because with the decades-long business relationship, which is written about in the book by Craig Unger, House of Bush, House of Sod, to me, this whole act of classifying those 28 pages is a direct extension of that relationship.
Now, have you heard also that there's a mention of Israeli participation? I thought I heard that, it might have even been from Graham. Have you heard that, Les, or not? That there's a
no.
mention of Israeli input.
In the 28 pages?
Yes.
I have not heard that. I've not heard that, but they had, here's the, their words is certain other governments. We don't know what that means. We don't know what that means. So,
Pakistan, I mean, you already know that, right?
yeah, now, if the question is being raised about Saudi funding, why not also bring up the ISI funding of $100,000 being wired from Pakistan, the ISI, right?
That's been out there for a long time.
And
Are they related to the planes or to the controlled demolition, or all together?
in the 28 pages,
Yeah. Is this related only to the planes that?
no, it's related to
Because
funding.
if we are stating that it's a controlled demolition,
No.
it's something that's
No,
planned
no,
already.
there's nothing in there that, to my knowledge, having to do with the buildings. It's all the what I would call the geopolitical aspects. Funding and governments involved.
Well,
and,
specifically the hijackers.
Particular,
Specifically the hijackers, and Mark's point is that, well, maybe the hijackers weren't in the planes, well, that's right, but they had a role, they clearly had a role. They had the patsy role.
Patsy.
the Patsy.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like there was no Muhammad Atta. Muhammad Atta was out there, he did a whole lot of stuff leading into this, you know, under obvious
Right,
direction.
right, and then there's an awful lot of anomalies associated with David Gray Griffin wrote about, and for instance, they're visiting nightclubs and casinos and drinking and doing drugs and all that. All this stuff can be part of the unraveling, and you know this has gotten mainstream. Another major factor here is this has gotten mainstream news in New York Times, even New York Post, CNN. And by the way, on this website, right here, hr14.org, if you look at this link, resources, it's all there. Okay? Russ Baker has written about it also in quite a bit in Who, What, Why. Now, this, folks, is bringing attention to 9/11 that we ourselves will never be able to reach the amount of people from one article that this is bringing. This is bringing attention from not only the general public, millions of people, but maybe even the people throughout these halls here who are part of the left, who are part of the centuries-long populist struggle, that hopefully they can start to finally wake up and say, well, wait a minute, these 9/11 conspiracy folks, right? You know, maybe finally they'll add 9/11 to the other conspiracies that they're okay with, like, you know, Iran-Contra, you know, BCCI scandal, a few things like that. They're okay with those scandals. They're okay with those conspiracies. Now, hopefully, through this type of press coverage, they will finally start to see that it is safe. Matter of fact, I got an indication yesterday that this could very well be the case. Want to hear about it?
Yeah.
I attended a panel about social networking, and on the panel was David Swanson, huge anti-war activist, high profile, and Jeff Cohen. I'm sure you know these guys. And Fair, and truthaction.org. It's a big petition site. Anybody can go there and set up a petition, and they will help to promote these petitions, and even get rootsaction.org. Yeah, I said, and then even get it printed out and taken to Congress. So here's the interesting thing I find is that the left, which like